Ian Murray, I have to say, we got elected at the same time and you were one of the most normal colleagues in there, because you can't say that for every MP.
Normality is not this usual thing.
No, it's really not. But I remember meeting you earlier on and thinking, my goodness, a normal person. You were the first person in your family to go to university. Your family had jobs, not careers.
Yeah.
Tell me about what sort of jobs they had.
Yeah, well, my father was a cooper and built barrels most of his life until he went into management and into exporting of whiskey. So enjoyed that immensely. And my mum was a cleaner, a bookmaker, a kitchen porter, you name it. I mean, she's tried her hand at most things and enjoyed them, but very low-paying jobs.
You went to university though. Was that because of your mum and dad instilling that into you? Yeah,
I mean, I went to Western Hills Education Centre, and for your viewers, that's essentially a community high school and ranks at the bottom of every league table in Edinburgh. And I got to 5th year and got on very well. We had a lovely cohort of people in my year and got on really well with the teaching staff. And I just remember messing about in the corridor one lunchtime, and the assistant head walked past and said, "Murray, my office," and I thought I was in real trouble. And he said, "Look, there's nothing really here for you at school next year. Do you fancy going straight to university?" And I just jumped at the chance. It was a great idea, and he eventually forced me into it, essentially, but best thing I've ever done.
How old were you when you went to university?
When I first walked through the door, 16.
How does that work? That's incredible. You must have been a genius.
I won't give away too many of my secrets. It wouldn't happen now, but you could get served in all the pubs at 16 with your student card. So I can't really remember too much about it.
Gosh, I mean, there can't be many 16-year-olds at your university.
There weren't many at Edinburgh.
So you were at Edinburgh, so one of the poshest universities in the UK.
Yeah, it was my home city and my home university, and I loved it. Would I do it again? Would I advise anybody to go at 16? Probably not. I mean, I wish I'd gone and travelled for a bit, or gone and done something else, or maybe even gone to university in a different city or a different country and broadened my horizons a bit. But it was a great idea at the time, and I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Did you live at home?
I did for the first year, and then I went and lived in various flats, various scandal-ridden flats around Edinburgh, which are still much talked about.
Oh, you might tell us some of your best bits later. But let's get serious first of all, because the most terrible thing happens to you when you're 9 years old.
Yeah.
Tell me what happened to your dad.
We were a small but very close family. I mean, there was only 8 of us. Eight of us, yeah. There was me, my older brother, my mum and dad, and 3 grandparents and an uncle. That was the entire pretty much extended family, all living next to each other as you did back then, within about a mile of each other. And Wednesday nights were lads' night in our house, because mum went to the bingo and dad and the 2 boys played on the 6-foot snooker table. And the only reason we did that on a Wednesday when mum was at bingo is because we got blue chalk all over the walls, because the room wasn't big enough to play the snooker properly. And one Wednesday evening, dad hadn't been feeling too well. He'd been a bit poorly. And it's a funny story when you tell it, but actually the consequences are pretty huge. But we were playing snooker and he was in his pyjamas and his pyjama bottoms fell down. And I was only 9, so I started laughing. My brother was a little bit embarrassed and a bit concerned, but just thought he was messing around, and then never missed a ball for about 10 minutes. Just potted everything, and we were going, "This is a bit strange." 10 minutes later, he's on the floor. So I'd had a cerebral hemorrhage. I thought it was the flu for the weeks before. Of course, my brother phoned the bingo, my mum came rushing home, and our only concern as young lads was to get this snooker table away, because mum would have been furious that we were playing snooker in the lounge. So we managed to get it back into the cupboard. And he just lay there sort of motionless, and we got, eventually the ambulance came, we were packed off into the room. And the 3 things I remember about it were, firstly, I peeked out the room as the ambulance were taking him away, and he was sick everywhere, which seemingly happens when you've had some kind of trauma. Your body empties out. We thought, oh, he's maybe just a bit ill. And then 4 o'clock in the morning or so, we shared a room. Mum came back and said, "Look, Dad's not coming home." And then I sort of went back to sleep, didn't really know what was going on. And then about 7 o'clock in the following morning, woke up, went into the lounge, and the whole family were sitting there. And that's when it really sunk in, because it was a sort of pink NHS bag with all his stuff in it, including his pyjamas that kept falling down and his glasses on the top, and that was really sort of defined the family. The lesson in there is he had been ill for some time but didn't tell anyone, and should have really got some advice. Whether or not in the mid-80s, he was only 39, you would have been able to get the medical attention required to sort something like that. I don't know, because obviously it's moved on quite a bit, but he was having blackouts at work and wasn't telling anyone. He was feeling a bit depressed, which is all the great symptoms of having something wrong with your brain. And at 39, that was him. Now that I'm 6 years older than that now, so I reflect on it a lot. And being a father now as well, I reflect on it a lot. But yeah, I mean, utterly traumatic, and my poor mum had to deal with the consequences of it, really.
How does a 9-year-old make sense of that? Children in many ways are quite robust with trauma, but there must be lasting consequences of that moment, or not.
I mean, it's difficult because as a 9-year-old, maybe I was too young. So I suppose the only consequence of that moment for me is I didn't really know him. I've got memories of holidays and that kind of stuff, but when you're 9, I think you might just be a little bit too young to hang on to that sort of much wider memory of anybody, let alone your own father. But it's only now when you reflect back, you think, that must have been pretty traumatic. Would I be where I am now if that hadn't happened? Who knows? Has it been an inspiration my entire life and I've not known about it? Don't know. Do I think that he's a great inspiration to me now because he's someone that I still, talk to and think is there? So probably. But it's really difficult to know what the full impacts are. But, it happens to a lot of families, and a son losing a father is pretty difficult. But, my mum obviously went into 6th gear and brought up 2 boys on her own.
Do you still have your mum?
Yeah, she's still around, yeah. She's 75 now.
She's done a remarkable job, hasn't she?
She's great. And she did it by, she worked 2 jobs. She worked in the bookmakers and she cleaned in the mornings, bookmakers in the afternoon. Her favourite day was Grand National Day when she was on the chalkboards chalking up all the odds and things and all the totes. I mean, she loved that job, and she just worked her way through various jobs.
What's her name? She sounds amazing.
Yeah, Lena, yeah. She's great, yeah. She doesn't talk about it at all, which is really quite interesting. She's never, ever spoken about it, apart from her regret that she didn't let us boys go to the funeral, which was a choice she made at the time, and I think she regrets that, but she's never spoken about it.
She was trying to be kind,
probably
wanting you not to go to the funeral.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's done through love.
And she made the right choice, but she regrets it now, I think, yeah. But that's the only thing she's ever spoken about.
And you don't have any
no
regrets,
memory of it whatsoever. No. Yeah, no memory of whatsoever. So, yeah, it's a regret she has, but she just really shouldn't.
So you have this major trauma, one of the worst traumas. You're there at the time, and then you've become a child genius, and you're at university at age 16. Did something happen? Were you always really, really clever?
I just loved school.
Really?
I really loved school. In fact, I probably would be a teacher if I had to choose another profession. I just loved school, and it wasn't necessarily a love for learning. I just loved the camaraderie of the classroom. I really got on well with the teachers. I loved to learn. I was very numeric. I still don't write properly, so it was never about literacy. It was more about numeracy, and I just loved being at school. So, and I think if you enjoy something, you thrive on it. So I was never a child genius or anything like that. I just really enjoyed being at school.
So you said you loved numbers, but you said I can barely write properly now.
Yeah. I mean, I was very, very, very into numbers, but I just my grammar's horrendous. Split infinitives, whatever they are.
Whatever they are.
Where'd you put the? When do you use a semicolon? I have no idea.
Did you do a maths degree?
Well, actually, when I went to university at 16, I was enrolled for maths and physics.
Goodness me.
And I did 3 months of it and hated it and ditched it. And I bumped into the director of studies at the law school in a pub one night, and we just got chatting, and he said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Maths and physics, but I hate it." And he went, "Well, why don't you see if you can switch across?" Ended up doing social policy, politics and law.
Completely different.
Completely different, and loved it. So yeah, it was a bit of a coincidence that I met this guy in the pub, but also I just couldn't see myself doing maths and physics for any longer than 5 minutes, never mind 5 years.
So you graduate by the age of
20.
Wow.
So
because they're 4-year degrees.
What a year that was. I graduated. My favourite football club won the Scottish Cup for the first time in 42 years, and Labour won the landslide election in 97.
Well, I know about the 97 one. Who's your favourite football club?
Hearts Football Club, Heart of Midlothian.
So, we got elected in 2010. You are the only Scottish Labour MP to keep their seat in 2015. And I remember, you remember, but just so other people know, I mean, so much of the Parliamentary Labour Party was made up of Scottish MPs.
Yeah.
It's hard to even contemplate now. You hold on to your seat, the only person to do so. And of course, like, there's a position for Scottish Secretary in the Shadow Cabinet. Well, who else is going to... Of course, you're very qualified. But, I mean, literally, even if you weren't, you may well have been Scottish Secretary. Tell me about your appointment.
Well, it was strange. I mean, I might get some of this slightly wrong, but because I'd been the only person to win, my phone for 24 hours was just completely red hot. And there was this woman called Harriet from the BBC Scotland, who was phoning me up constantly to say, could you do drive time? Could you do the morning show? Could you do Good Morning Scotland? And what about Sunday shows? Obviously, because the election was on the Thursday, elected overnight on the Thursday night into the Friday. And I just said, look, it's been a really tough election. I've done all the media I really want to do. I've nothing else to say. And until things settle down, I'm not quite sure I want to do any more. And she kept ringing and ringing. And then my phone rang again, and I just picked it up. I was in my flat at home, the flat I still live in, and I just said, Ian Murray speaking, and I just heard this, it's Harriet here, and I didn't hear anything else. The voice on the other side of the phone said, I'd like you to join the Shadow Cabinet. And I thought I heard, are you joining the Shadow Cabinet? And I went, look, Harriet, will you stop bothering me? It's been a long week. You know, I am the only one that's left. We're all in a bit of shock here. And I'm sick of journalists phoning me asking the Shadow Cabinet. So the answer is no comment. And I put the phone down. And actually, the phone rang again. It was Harriet Harman, as the acting leader of the Labour Party, offering me a place in the Shadow Cabinet. So I apologise profusely. And she promised never to mention it. And I promised I would never tell the story. But you know Harriet, I mean, Harriet's quite stern. She's quite, you know.
Yeah, yes. But, oh my goodness.
And she must have been thinking, he's the only one we've got, and he's just turned it down. What am I going to do now?
Oh gosh, that's a very funny story. That's a very funny story. And you're still Scottish Secretary. You resigned from the Shadow Cabinet under Jeremy Corbyn.
Yeah.
We all did.
Yeah. Just unsustainable, yeah.
I shouldn't say we all, but you and I, most people did. It's reported that you thought very seriously about leaving the Labour Party and joining Change UK. You didn't. Was it a tough decision? Were you nearly there?
Yeah, it was a tough decision. I mean, all the stuff that's written about this, most of it's rubbish. It was weeks before I decided to pull out. But actually, I think it's a really positive thing, because we all sat there in our darkest days thinking this isn't the Labour Party anymore. And some of us felt as if we had the responsibility to do something about it. Now, others took a step much longer than I had by joining Change UK or leaving the party altogether, or, you know, deciding they weren't going to run again. And that was all absolutely fine. But I just decided to stay and fight, because I felt it was my party and not theirs. And in actual fact, I felt a responsibility as a custodian of the Labour Party that I would fight for it. So I've no criticisms of the people that did leave. I've no criticisms of the people that did what they did, because they all did it for the right reasons. And ultimately, as we look back now, the Labour Party's on the verge of perhaps being in government. Maybe we all made the right decision, and the aggregate of all of that has now got us to where we've got to now, and I hope that's the case.
So you are the only Scottish Labour MP. The SNP, Nicola Sturgeon, hegemonic for so long. They have been in power. Do you think you'll see an independent Scotland within your lifetime? I
absolutely don't think I will, because it just doesn't work. They just cannot find a viable way of promoting a proposition that works. And that's not to say they might not win it eventually. And Nicola Sturgeon said last week that if they lose a second one, they'll have a third. And all this stuff now about mandates, about Brexit, about the Tories, about all of the excuses that they give for another referendum are all the excuses that were given the day after the last one. So they would just find an excuse and a trigger to have one. And as all that's happening, and I see it in my own constituency day in, day out, NHS is getting worse, educational attainment gaps widening, transport's dreadful, the economy's slipping behind the rest of the UK, the number of high-rate taxpayers is diminishing, the demographics are much older, and therefore all the problems that comes with that. And none of that's being dealt with. It's just all Westminster's fault, vote for independence. And I just think at some point something will break and Scottish voters will go, we can't go on like this. And maybe that'll take another referendum. You know, I don't want one. We shouldn't have one. If we end up having one, we'll fight very, very hard to stay in the United Kingdom. But something's going to have to break to get out of this, otherwise we're going to stay on this constitutional merry-go-round and things are just going to get worse. This Scottish Government essentially uses the Scottish Parliament to manage decline.
Okay, I just want to ask you a final question. You became a dad 2 years ago. What's the best thing about that?
What the best thing about that? Gosh. I mean, your whole focus just changes. So, you know, the responsibility is huge. I've only ever looked after myself, but the responsibility is huge. Mariam's such a brilliant mum. I mean, she's the nurturer. So essentially, Mariam's the director of catering and nurturing, and I'm the director of entertainment. And I just love, she makes me laugh every day, Zola. She's just the funniest thing. And seeing her grow up is the best thing about fatherhood.
Why can't you cook?
Oh, I can certainly cook, but you know, I have the facilities, but not the ability to create the milk. So that's why she's director of catering.
Good,
so
good clarification
I absolutely can cook. I thought I used to be a chef, so
yes,
I can cook. I used to have my own pubs and used to be a chef. So, but yeah, fatherhood's just great. And I've become a father very late. I was 44 when Zola was born, and I think that's a really good thing because I've had a brilliant life up to now, and now it's just a different life, and I love it. And she's great to be around, and she makes me laugh. And it really does refocus what's important.
You know, despite the trauma, unbelievably traumatic event that had you, you're just a very positive person. Yeah. It's been really engaging to listen to you and chat to you. Thank you, Ian Murray.
It's great to see you.
Thank you.